Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, welcome back to Coffee and the Bull. This is Mike, sitting here with John. Today we're going to be talking about the title of today's episode is going to be "Hey Man, You Got a Minute?" And just to start off, right from the bat, this has been a staple comment in mine and John's relationship. Typically, when it's me calling him to complain about something going on in life, whether it be my wife driving me up a wall, whether it be different instances at work that are just tugging at my brain, and honestly, it's a little bit of just bitching. Is all it really boils down to. And it starts off with, if you can use a little bit of detective skills here. It usually starts with me calling John and him hello. And I'll go, hey, man, you got a minute?
It's
and
usually a lot more aggressive.
Yeah, it's a little bit more aggressive. Usually I'm mad. There's a little bit of anger issues going on there. But, a couple of years ago, I had a business going on, a little construction business. And for anybody out listening who has ever had a company and had the wonderful nightmare of being an employer, having somebody work for you, it is probably the worst thing you can ever experience. And I mean that with every syllable of those words. Because I had a couple guys working underneath me at the time, and I honestly think they had get-togethers, like maybe Friday night got together for a couple drinks.
Today.
Do what?
How we ruin
Right.
Mike's
It's
life
hey,
today.
how can we mess up this job in a way that he has not experienced yet? And what I mean by that is, I took a vacation one day, and I hadn't taken a vacation in years. Finally saved up, and me and my wife, we were taking our son to the Grand Canyon. Super excited about it, and explained to the guys what I wanted done on this one. Y'all just work on this one job site. That's all I want you to do. We're sheetrocking this house. Throw the sheetrock up, float it, put some paint on the walls. And so I got calls every day, referencing, the progress that had been made and stuff like that. And I think this was probably the very first, hey man, you got a minute instance that we had, as far as me directing it at you. And
Which was awesome because I didn't know a damn thing about what
right.
what was going on.
And so yeah, he's not in construction, but it was one of the things where I get back from vacation, and I've got an expectation in my brain what should be done, because that's how it's been explained to me, and I'm expecting walls are up, they've been painted, trim work's been done, and everything else. And so I show up, meet the guys. We had flown back in, and I left my wife at the house immediately. We were working in a hurricane area, or hurricane damaged area at the time, so I'm 4 or 5 hours away from home, and so I drive in, meet the guys on a Friday evening so I can give them their checks, send them up the road, let them enjoy the weekend before they come back on work on Monday. And so I meet up with the guys, give them their checks, tell them thank you, for taking care of everything, so I can enjoy my vacation, right? And so they all leave, and since I'm 5 hours away from home, I'm spending the night. And I go to the job site, and I walk into this mobile home that we were supposed to redo part of it, and walk into the room, go to flick a light on, and my hand hits just bare wall. Like you don't think about it walking into a room. It's typical where light switches and stuff should be.
Right.
And I remember hitting it, and I was like, my hand should have made contact with something on that wall, and couldn't find anything. So I noticed it's kind of dark, so I pull my phone out and I turn my light on, and I cannot for the life of me find a light switch, and I'm like, what is going on here? Because at this point, I'd been a cop for a couple years prior to this, so I knew I had a little bit of detective skills. Like, I should be able to find a light switch. They don't hide from you,
Right.
And I look, there's not one anywhere on this wall. And I remember there being one when we demoed it, And so I was like, this is odd. I look up at the ceiling, there's no light fixture, and I'm like, what in the world is, like, what did these jackasses do? And I, honestly, that was a thought. I was like, what did these jackasses do? And all the outlets on the wall, they're nothing's solid wall. These guys had taken all the wires and undid all the fixtures, all the outlets, everything. Took them, threw them into the attic, and then sheetrocked over it. And nothing, like, there's no outlets. They sheetrocked over everything. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, not only are we not where I thought we needed to be.
Right.
We are way like we're starting. Not you got to start over, but I'm now got to spend time taking all this back down, which is time, it's money, and everything else. And I'm like, I just paid these jackasses to go
To
home
do
and have a
that.
great weekend.
Right.
You know, I paid them to do this type of work, and you can't fix it without taking it all down. You know,
Right.
because I'm not an electrician. I've got to now pay an electrician to come in and run all the wires and do all this other stuff. And on top of that, I got to do that before the guy who contracted me to do this finds out. Bro, when I tell you, it sent me into a world of just, and I know that everybody who's on the business who have had even one employee knows what I'm going through. You know, at this moment in my brain, and I think that was a moment where I called you, and I was like, "Hey, man, you got a minute?" And had no clue. He had absolutely zero clue
The
what was about to come across that phone. You know,
Right.
and I don't even think. I mean, we were good friends at the time, but I don't think we were super close.
No.
Like
no.
it was definitely at the beginning stages of relying on each other.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what you said, but I remember just I needed about 45 minutes of just yelling and screaming without having to worry about who was on the other end of the line
Right. Right.
losing their mind or whatever. You know,
I think I just happened to be the only one that answered the
yeah,
phone at that time of
that
night.
very well may have been it, because everybody else who I called, it was just like, no, you're lying. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, it seemed like I was making it up, and to this day I was like, and what's bad is that wasn't the only time. Like there was,
No,
I'd
it
had
wasn't.
times where, you know, we put in brand new flooring in a house, and then they spilled a bucket of paint, and went to lunch after it, and I'm like, you know, so I walk in, the for this specific job site, the homeowner is on his way to come meet me, and I walk in, and there's paint all over this brand new floor where a bucket just tipped over, and like I called the guy, I said, hey man, what's all this about? Oh, I was going to get it when I come back. I'm like, bro, that's $4,000 worth of flooring that we
Right.
just left paint on, and so man, it was that was probably the roughest 2 years of my life was running a construction company. You know, because you know, you got to deal with customers. You got to deal and I understand they want their stuff done right. Some of them don't have a clue what right means, and they
Right.
think they do, but they want their stuff done right. You got employees who always want more money. You know, you got insurance is always going at you, and so it taught me a lot of financial stress that I was previously unaware of. But a lot of that was constantly having to deal with stuff and calling you and say, "Hey man, you got a minute? I just need somebody to vent to, or I need just honestly just need a moment." And I think that was a big growing time in our life.
Right.
Um,
And really, it's a venting point, so that
so that you don't vent to the wrong person.
right,
You know?
and you don't take it out on somebody who can't handle uh, that veracity
Right,
that's coming.
right.
You know, and especially when you know that it's not geared towards you, it's easier to sit on the other end of that phone or the other end of that conversation.
And team up and be like, woo-hoo, they're
Yeah,
dumb.
yeah.
They so dumb.
Right.
You know?
Boy, I'd be mad. I know
I'd be-
you are.
Yeah, I'm
you
glad
know.
I'm glad I don't have to deal with it.
See, and for me, it was never a. I hate saying it. I'm not that guy that says it. I'm more of that. If you know me, you can read it.
Right.
Kind of guy. And I hide it very well. But I remember that moment that I knew that I could trust and confide in you was right after my incident. I'd been injured on the job, which we had our trauma bonding moment, and I was dealing with that. And in the course of that, you know, you get shot in the line of duty, and you have to take a period of time out of law enforcement. You have to see a counselor, and you have to, you know, spend time at home and try to adapt and adjust from it. And it was because of that time that found out that my ex-wife was having numerous affairs, and, you know, was just this terrible person as far as a marriage goes. At the same time, I'm paycheck to paycheck. Not only does the agency not pay very well, which not a dig at the agency per se, but you know, that's just where it was at the time. So I'm learning that money's being shifted around, and even bringing in another close friend of mine to stay with me wasn't financially helping me the way that I thought it would. Not because that friend wasn't paying his rent or helping out with bills, but because it was all going to the same person who was financially irresponsible.
Right.
That I can hang my hat on and say it wasn't me. Um, so I just had all of this just on my chest at one time. You know, you've got to combat the criticism at work. You've got to, you know, how do you adjust and go back to work after you've had this incident? You've got everybody at work looking at you, whether, you know, they were there and they know the details, or they weren't there and they're guessing the details, because with every job, the rumor mill runs rampant.
Right.
And on top of that, you know, you're dealing with a work situation. You're dealing with a finance situation. You're dealing with a crumbling marriage, and your ideal picturesque view of your home and family is now just destroyed. And so I'm sitting in my bed. You know, the kids are off with grandma, and the ex is God knows where. And so I'm trying to piece everything together, and I just remember that being my low point. I was so depressed. Hadn't gone back to work yet. Had just started looking at my mortgage statements and my electric bill and everything else. And the phone rings, and it was you on the other side. You still had your other house, and basically just, hey man, how you doing? And I was like, I'm okay. And you were like, what are you doing today? I was like, nothing. And it was very, I was one worded. I wasn't trying to get into an in-depth conversation. To be fair, I just wanted to get off the phone. I was like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to talk to anybody. Because I had built myself to just deal with everything, to combat it on my own, figure it out, and move forward. And to be fair, I was at a point where I was just spinning wheels. There was no going forward. I didn't know which way was up or which way to go forward. And you were like, well, why don't you come over? I'm going to get some stuff in a pile and I'm going to burn it. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And it was funny because you're like, I'm not asking. I'll see you when you get here. And it was that awkward moment where, like, I didn't want to go, but at the same time I didn't want to be rude because I was brand new. I didn't want to piss off the supervisor. And I was like, all right, well, I have no idea where you live.
Right.
And you were like, oh, I'll text you the address. So I got up, put my pants on, and we got there. And it wasn't so much that we had this in-depth conversation, because I don't even think I told you everything that was going on.
No.
I just remember you asking if I wanted something to drink, and I was like, I got Red Bull. And we just sat there. It was the shittiest fire. Like, it was not a big fire.
Well, it wasn't a big fire.
Like, not what I had envisioned at all. and we just sat there. We didn't really talk about anything serious. There was,
if I'm not mistaken, it was just Red Bull and cigars.
that was it. Yeah, that was all we did. But I remember more than anything when I got in the truck and I was headed back to the house, and I remember thinking to myself that I'd felt better. And it took me a while to realize it had nothing to do with the conversation. It didn't have anything to do with the fire. It was just a simple fact that when you go through life and you deal with all of these hardships, and out of the blue, not so much something you don't expect or something, least expected or whatever, but somebody pauses their life long enough to realize and see that you're not okay, and doesn't take no for an answer. Like, it's not happening. Like, you're coming over, you're gonna sit down, but there was no pressure. It was just I'm gonna be in your presence. I'm gonna be in your corner for whatever's going on, and that was enough to push me to say I got to get back to it, pick myself up, keep moving, and figure out the problem. And it honestly, it ties into a lot of things, because of that I became more, I think the kids call it trauma aware now, like of my finances, to a degree that I don't buy the first extra thing until I know every single bill's paid, because it's like, nope, I don't want to fall down that rabbit hole again. Because I don't want to burden somebody else with the weight of my world, because I know from the weight of my world that everybody else is crushed under their own weight, and we all have a different demon or a different battle or a different something, and I don't want to be that burden that adds to it. And so as our friendship has evolved, it's become easier to walk life. And I mean that in the sense that when I wake up every morning, well, evening, because we work nights, but when I wake up and I'm putting my boots on, I know that everything I've got on the plate isn't as bad. Whatever's weighing on me the most, when I see you, I can gripe, moan, complain about it, and eventually, and I know we've said it before, like, oh, you hate your ex-wife? I hate your ex-wife too. Like,
Right.
it's that team, but I also know in that same breath the instances that, you've been here when I've had to do anything with my ex-wife, whether it's a birthday for the kids or she showed up for whatever. There was never a ill word out of you towards her or anything like that, because it keeps the peace, and that's, again, part of the bond and part of the friendship, and building that trust in. I know I can confide in you because I know you're not going to, A, throw it in my face later, and B, you're not going to cause a rift in my life to make waves, if you will,
Right.
to make it harder already, because you know every struggle I'm dealing with, you know what I'm battling, the ups and the downs of where I'm at, and that's the importance of, hey, you got a minute, you
Well, I think what it does is, and I think this is where we kind of get confused with a little bit of the differences between one generation to another.
Right.
And what I mean by that, like now there's terms like alpha male and all this other stuff, and like I've seen different people ride around in the trucks and say or hey, had one dude introduce me himself to me one time as being an alpha male. I'm like, first off, I don't know what that means.
Right.
Because
Right.
last, when I was growing up, you were just a dude, and you were either squared away or you weren't, but I think by today's definition, we work with a lot of alpha males, whatever that
Right.
really means,
Right.
guys who can take stressful situations, take charge, move forward. It's a lot of your we deal with a lot of military people, other cops, obviously. Firefighters, we're dealing with them all the time, but honestly, you've got the same type of people, in supervisory positions in
Right.
whatever line of work. Like you have these guys who are just squared away all the time, and what it turns into is that persona that you've got is, hey, if somebody can bring their problems to me, and hey, I'm there to help you out, whatever you need or whatever. And
Right.
what we do is we shut off the two-way street of that. It's like,
Exactly.
hey, bring your problems to me, I'll help you out through it, because you want to be that guy that other people can confide in, but you don't necessarily want to confide in. And so that, I think that brings in the the part that we've got to work on as
Yeah.
honestly as mankind, or whatever, whatever, however we want to go about it. But that is evident in generations going back to our grandparents, our parents, and even to our kids now.
Yep.
It's going to be something that we're not taught it. It's just part of who we are, as guys. We don't like airing
I,
our dirty laundry.
I think we are taught it, but I think we're taught it in a non-intentional way. I don't think
It's not
the
to be
intent,
malicious or anything,
right,
or
right.
it's not to create
Like I say,
weakness,
math, but
but it's right. It's something that you pick up. Kind of like my
right,
son will watch me do something or whatever. I don't have to teach him how to do it. He just watches me and he learns it by watching.
exactly.
So I think it's something kids pick up from their parents as time goes on, and you don't. We hear it all the time. You don't want to air your dirty laundry. Well, guys, we do that. We don't want to tell anybody about what's going on.
Right,
I don't want to tell. You know, a lot of times you don't want to tell your friends because you don't want them to make fun of you.
right. Or look down on you and think
Right.
less of you.
Like I know in our line of work, the last thing I want is to have a moment of weakness and the wrong person at work find out about it,
Right.
because then it's, oh, look at this dude, what, and so you try to, you stay guarded,
Right. The
and
facade. We talked about that the other day. This facade that I got everything under control and
Right.
I've got it handled, and let me walk you through that because I've been there.
right,
Not realizing that you're still combating your own struggles.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So I mean that was a big topic that we had the other day, where it's almost like you put the mask on and you put on this brave face to go out and battle everything head on by yourself, and we forget that we as human beings have got to stop, and there's things that there's shit all the time that we're gonna I got that, I can handle that.
right,
There's other things you've got to stop, and before you make that rash decision of I'm going to leave my 20-year marriage for the 23-year-old girl because that's an easier battle,
right,
or
right.
I'm just going to go gamble my problems away because in my head if I win big all my problems are over, or walking away from the good job to go do this other job because hey, that might be more fun, or whatever the case may be, the midlife crisis, if you will. Because we put that brave face on for so long that when it comes time to pay the piper, that's when we break. That's when everybody goes, oh shit, I didn't know Dave was
Right,
having that big
right,
of a problem.
right.
Also, I don't know anybody named Dave with a problem. I just random names pop up. But that's part of that facade that we have because of this bullshit stigma that we have alpha males and non-alpha males. That's not the case. It's not the
Right.
case at all.
Right.
I know guys that I served overseas with that were, phenomenal at stacking bodies, and as they say, and now they're, wearing suit and tie selling cars, or they're, tow truck drivers, or, police officers, or other non-alpha male role
Right.
type jobs. And it's like, in my head, I don't believe in the alpha male concept.
Right.
I'm not saying that there aren't masculine men out there who aren't good leaders or good, combat people or battle oriented people. But number one, we get old. There's nothing you can do about it. My grandfather who just passed away, that dude was a BA, as they say, during Vietnam. And
He was a bay.
Yeah.
A bay.
I think they pronounce it Ba.
So stupid.
He was a badass.
Right.
Based
Okay, that's
on
what it means.
Yeah, a BA.
Got it now.
Based on everything I read in his DD 214, his citations and awards that he received, like that dude was a genuine hero. His part of some of his duties as a firefighter were to go onto the planes as they crash landed from bombing and stuff like that from Japan. So these planes would be on fire.
Right. He's going pulling people off.
Yeah, he would run in there and save lives, like received accommodation for saving lives. And, when I meet him, he's just this 5'8", old kind of pot belly,
Tired guy.
Tired old man.
Right.
But in his line of work, and you could hear it in his voice, the way his voice would change back in his younger days, and he would tell these stories about how his men followed him and how he was humble about it, but he was always telling these stories where you're just like, whatever, grandpa. And then you get older, you start to learn life, and you read it, and you're like, this motherfucker was a badass, like, god dang.
Right.
And so, like, I don't believe in an alpha male type because we grow old. We lose out of that. We grow out of that. But I also don't believe that the guys who are nurses or the guys who are, midwives or some of the softer roles, if you will, I don't think that they're less
I don't
of a
think they're
dominant
subservient
personality.
or anything like
Right,
that.
right.
End of the day, they're still dealing with the same stuff we're dealing with.
Right, right.
And so you got that divider line.
The problem is we weigh too much on it.
Right.
We've got to find that balance in the middle.
I think that's one of the things when you meet a new guy, right? Whether it be you go to a family reunion or whatever, somebody brought their boyfriend or whatever, you can put a group of guys together that's never met each other in a room, and the within the first, I say the first 5 questions that you talk to somebody that you've never knew. Hey man, what do you do for a living? And we judge each other on that.
Oh,
Based on what type of person you think they're going to be based on their occupation. But there's a lot of it's not necessarily being judgmental, but it is. And I think that carries a lot of weight where we don't want to talk to people who aren't like us. If you put me in the room with, for example, a tech guy, a computer person, I don't have it. I don't understand half the words that they're going to say.
Right.
So I'm going to walk away from them, or not necessarily walk away from them, but
I'm not going to engage it.
You put me with somebody who, he's a mechanic. He works on cars. I don't necessarily know the most about cars, but I know more about cars than I do computers.
Right.
And so I'm going to gravitate more in that direction. And I think we do that a lot, where you find yourself with guys that are, your best friends are going to be just like you.
Right.
Rarely ever do you see this drastic change, between two guys who are best friends. You're not going to have an insurance salesman and somebody turning wrenches. They'll be friends, but that really, really close friend is going to be somebody who does a lot like you most of the time, or you at least have something that you share, whether it be several years in high school or
commonality,
whatever. And when you can start looking at people and seeing who you've got the most to deal with, and who you've got around you that you can actually confide in, that's where you get the, hey man, you got a minute type person. Because you can't do that to everybody. I've got people I work with right now who they do the exact same job, but because we have different mindsets,
right.
If I confide in them something that I've got going on, they may not be malicious, but they may run their mouth or something like that, and so that would just go completely opposite to what the goal is.
Right. And I think that's why we draw away from it, because we don't have that. And
hey guys, it's Mike with Coffee and the Bull. I just want to take a moment and say thank you for giving us a listen. I just ask that you go ahead, give us a moment and do all the typical podcast stuff. Hit that like, follow, share, subscribe button. If you want to take and send us an email, our email address is going to be coffeeandthebull@yahoo.com. Send us your story. Let us know what you got going on, something you want to hear about, or different topics you want us to cover. Give us a shout. So for now, thank you and toodaloo.
What caught me just a moment ago was the situation where you're talking to somebody who's in the similar field, and it was something that jarred in my brain. We were on a traffic stop, and it wasn't ours. It was another deputy's. A fourth deputy showed up, and he had a tourniquet, and he had it on his gear, and this dude had gone out of his way to sell us on the fact that he was a special forces
combat
medic.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember when he first said it, everybody just kind of was like, yeah, all right, whatever. But when he showed up out there on that traffic stop, and you and I were standing next to that first deputy who did the traffic stop, we were standing next to his unit, and this idiot shows up just a bumbling fat idiot. And I'm not trying to body shame. I'm not trying to diminish somebody based on their intelligence. Number one, he was overweight. Number two, he was a liar, and number three, I
think that's the biggest thing, and I think that's what. If I can interrupt for a minute, I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of guys aren't going to overlook.
Right.
I've got friends who are overweight. I'm overweight. I'm by all means we're not judging on that. I'm stocky, but it's a lot of guys. You will lose them forever if you're a liar.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we'll go with this guy. We'll focus on with that.
And it was one of those things where it's like, when you've lived that life, you pick up on context clues, and especially in law enforcement, you get so good at reading people and knowing body language and knowing when they're lying and knowing when things just aren't adding up. 1 and 1 is not making 2.
Right.
And I remember when he showed up, and we both almost simultaneously looked down, saw that the tourniquet was still in the plastic
wrapper,
and we both were like, "Hey man, what's going on with that? Why is it still in the wrapper?" And you just took it off of him and started opening. He was like, "Oh, I don't like to do that. I don't want to get dirty with debris." And
right, anybody who's been in that situation knows
this needs to be prepped. You need to pre-work this tourniquet, because when sugar turns to shit and you're fighting, the good fight,
Right.
you got to be ready to go with that.
Right.
The way that this thing is packaged, still in the saran, plastic wrapping, like, you got to be ready to go. And it was in that moment that I was like, this dude will be worthless to me for the rest of my life.
Right.
I will be cordial to you. I will say hello to you at work. And up to that point, he had never done anything, cross with me. And so in my brain, I was just like, I have nothing for you.
Right.
Like, I won't confide in you my birthday, And so it made me laugh, because I was just thinking about that. I was like, we know almost immediately, like, this guy can come over for Thanksgiving, and this guy doesn't need to know my first name.
Right.
And
well, so I would say, because obviously, I would say that I know that I can confide in you, vice versa. We've done it for years. But for the person listening to the podcast who may not know who it is, if we can give them a direction to go, I would honestly say, and this is not scientific. This is not, been put to
did not go to
I
college.
haven't run this through. This is 100% just straight off the hip here. Look at the guy that you can link up with on playing Call of Duty, and see if you can get band together.
Right.
Like when you have that guy who you're going to say something that's going to get you banned off the game, and he's with you 100%. Hey, if it means you're not playing for a couple days, it means you're not playing for a couple.
Yeah.
That's probably the guy that you can trust in, because he's sharing your mindset. He's just taking that moment and I don't want to keep throwing this out there, but hey man, you got a minute. We use it for for stress relief all the time. Hop and play video games, and I think that's one of the things is that person that you can use to alleviate some stress is most likely going to be that guy who's like, hey, I got you, bro. They're going to make fun of you, because don't get me wrong. You've seen me in my best moments. You've seen me in my darkest moments, and you've made fun of me in all of them.
Yeah.
Timing's a key.
Right.
When the other one's crying, it's probably not the best time, or it might be. Who knows?
Might be.
You really got to play that one by ear.
Jam a thumb in the exit hole and see how it goes.
Right. And so it's one of the things where that person who you get to be 100% yourself with,
right?
The unadulterated, just genuine you. That's going to be the person that you need to look for.
And I'll tell you, some of the closest friends we have are usually the guys that there is no line.
Right.
There is no like, hey, don't say this joke or whatever. One, because most of those things are like unwritten. Like, we know, certain avenues we're not going down.
Right.
We're just because you read that person. Like for, just an example, we have a couple of our black friends that the jokes that go back and forth between all four of us are like,
we might as well be wearing hoods.
Yeah.
Because honestly, when you start telling black jokes to your black friends, and it's not meant in hate, it's meant in humor.
Right. And their jokes are right.
And they turn around saying, I didn't realize there was that many white jokes, but by God, they're there.
They've got them down.
And it becomes a big battle. But the moment, and we've experienced it a couple different times, the moment something goes on in their life or ours, that phone hits, and it's one of those things where it could be 3 a.m, because there's some of your friends that you can call at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, they're going to answer every single time.
Every time.
But at 2 a.m, they've got that line saying, hey, I don't want you calling me right now.
Right.
And they may not be direct about it, but it's that person who at 3 a.m, when you see their name pop up on the phone, you're like, they're either messing with me or there's something going on.
Right.
But I've got to find out what it is.
Because now I'm awake and I got to know.
And like I've had the conversation with one of them, and he's going to be a guest here on the show. Like he made a statement to me not that long ago. He goes, hey, I'm just checking on you, see where you're at regarding this. And hey man, I'm good. And let him, had a quick conversation. He goes, okay, just letting you know, you got 2 days. And I'm letting the jokes fly.
Right.
And so, like, he gave me a countdown, and he was true to his word, 100%. We spoke 2 days later, and that's all I heard was him laughing as he told me his jokes. And it's as guys, we've got a very demented mindset. And that's where you get the dark humor. That's just honestly will make your mama blush.
Well, there's some jokes I would not say
Right.
ever to my mom,
And
and I hope that no one ever does.
right, right. So it's one of the things where like we have demented senses of humor, but that person who matches your energy,
Yeah.
that's who you can call and say, hey man, you got a minute,
Right.
and hey, they may make fun of you, but at the same time, that joking back and forth is honestly one of the best
It is.
mechanisms you can have to move forward. You know,
Right. Right. And that's one of the big things that I think made us, and our small group, and I say small, because in reality there's maybe three, four cops
Mm-hmm.
total that I would say, hey, let's rack around, let's go handle business, or hey, let's go hit this establishment of beverages. Um,
Right,
but there's, I don't drink. I'm not a big drinker. Alcohol's not my go-to. It long time ago that used to be my thing, and then one day I just stopped. And I know that I've had some beer with you once or twice. Usually it's a whiskey sour, but um, once with our lady cop. But outside of that, like I'm very particular with who I drink with because I know who I become when I drink,
right,
and I know that in my brain I've got to be around people that can control the situation around me.
mm-hmm.
Because what you don't want, and for the younger audience, you're going to realize later in life, I hope you realize later in life, that the people you surround yourself with is what or what brings the circumstances of the consequences that you're going to get into. And what I mean by that is younger me was stupid,
Right.
just stupid. I did a lot of things that I was intoxicated, and I did those things because of the people that I surrounded myself with. And so now my drinking, I don't do it, but when I do, it's very moderated, and it's only in a controlled environment
Right.
with people who I know aren't going to be like, "Hey, we ran out of beer, let's go get some more." Well, we're already drunk.
Well, I think one of the things is, and this is where mindset is everything, is everybody enjoys drinking with the guys who are fun drunks, right?
Right, right.
You know, the guy who, hey, he's happy with life and everything else going on. That's all fine and good. Like everybody has a blast. Oh, hey man, let's go get effed up, and all this other stuff. And that's always fun. Don't get me wrong. I've been there, and it's a blast. But as life goes on, and you start having other mental battles and stuff like that.
Wait, hold on. All right, go ahead.
There we go. You
don't
start having
interrupt.
mental battles that you're dealing with that some of your friends are they may or may not be aware of. That's on your forefront, and then you
Right.
take and you go, hey, let me just go get blitz for a minute. Well, now you're altering your mindset,
Right.
and that happened to me one time because I was always I was going to have fun when I drink, or I don't drink that much now, but I used to drink a lot, and it was one of the things where I'd have a blast, and it was we were always playing games and all this other stuff, and I went to a friend's house, and she'll be on this podcast at some point. Shout out to Justine. I went to
our
her
lady
house.
cop.
Yeah, our lady cop. I went to her house and I was mad about something. I don't even remember what, but it was something that I was struggling with at work that that I was keeping in because you don't ever want to air your problems at work and all this other stuff. And I remember getting she got me trashed. I'm not gonna lie, and it made it where I was so angry as a when I was drunk that it was altering everything around me.
Right.
And my wife wound up leaving me at her house. She's like, "Hey, he's your problem tonight."
Right.
You
did this.
and yeah, you did this to him, and I learned then that I don't want to be in that road or going down that road because she may not have signed up for that, right?
Right.
And so and so with her not knowing what was going on, that could have been a very dangerous situation or whatever.
Right.
And so that's one of the things where you've got your circle of friends. They've got to know where you're at mentally.
Yeah.
Like we run into it all the time. Like if for law enforcement or it's one of the things where if you got 5 guys and we're going to go serve a search warrant at this house, I'm operating under you're squared away that you don't have an issue. And so
Right.
if you're not vocal about, hey man, now's not the time I need to be kicking in a door. because I've got this going on. I'm distracted. Not necessarily, you're not that you're going to go overboard or anything like that. Nothing like that. But just if your brain's not in it, what we're about to do,
Right.
I need to know that. Because if you're distracted, you might miss something that could cause phone calls to go to both of our families.
Right.
And so it's one of the things where, and that's not just for law enforcement. That's for your circle of friends around you. They don't want to get that phone call saying, "Hey, look, he whatever happened, he decided to end his life," or or even something like that. He got drunk, got in a motorcycle wreck or something like that.
Right.
Like there's a list of different outcomes that could come from that, but your family and your friends need to know what you're going through, because they're living this life with you. And if they don't know what's going on, one, they can't help you, but two, you might be putting them in a spot where
They don't realize the danger.
they don't realize the
hidden
danger that they've got going
Yeah.
on. And so that's something that I think it's that's the focus of, hey man, I you got a minute.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have times like that, then how many times would we have been in something where one of us wants to go be, say, proactive or whatever at work, and the other one's like, look man, I'm not there right now. I've got this going on at the house or whatever. Like I'm not going to be paying attention to whatever's going on the scene. And so we just sit back for a minute,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's the best thing to do. But it's being honest with your friends so that we've answered that phone call enough times where you get it and you put the phone down and you take a minute. You're like, I don't know how we got to this spot.
Right. How do we miss this with
Right.
every single day and every time we work together? Never said anything.
Right.
And that was a big struggle. It's one of the reasons I hate, absolutely hate. And look, if you're an organizer for this or you put this together, thanks for trying. Personally, I hate the 22 a day push-up thing because it's stupid to me. Like, congratulations, you did 22 push-ups for 22 people who are no longer here when you could have just taken 22 minutes out of your day
And called somebody.
Call them. I have a Marine who, I'm not going to throw his name out there. He was a troubled Marine. He was, and I wasn't a performer. Don't get it mistaken. Like, I had my moments, but for the most part, I was an average Marine. I was not above average. I wasn't chesty puller, but I wasn't getting kicked out either. But this young man was on a very rocky road his entire time in the Marine Corps. He just couldn't get ahead. He couldn't get a win. Every once in a blue moon, I'll get an email from him, and all he needs is me to say, hey, Marine, you're good. Like, I'm still here. I know your name. I remember you. We're okay. And that's all he needs. That's what he needs. Now we're not all the same, and everybody's going to suffer from their own PTSD and their own trauma and everything else that comes from the things in our lives that affect us. But society's got to come up with something. We
Right.
got to do something,
Right.
which is, again, one of the big pushes for the podcast is we're not telling you we have an answer. And that's a big thing that I can't stress enough. We don't have all of the answers, and we can only
Right.
Mike and I can only stress what
What's helped us. It's not.
right.
It's not for everybody.
it's not. And
But-
there's nothing in the world that you can't find somebody to confide in. And I don't recommend your spouse for everything. Confide in your spouse.
Right.
You have to. But you can't confide everything in your spouse. Your dads are great to confide in. I love my father to death. There's some things I'm just not going to tell him. It's not that he can't handle it. I was thinking about a funny, you know what I'm thinking about. Kind of. You will after this when I say something. There's things I can bring to my dad. There's things I can't bring to my dad. He won't grasp it. He won't understand it. His generation, my generation, we have too big of a gap. You got to find somebody who maybe hasn't walked a similar life.
Right.
But they've walked a life enough that they can sit down and be like, bro, you're not right. Like, shoot it out. Tell me about it. What's going on? Like, let's talk this through. And we've crossed paths with enough people who are right there on that cusp of, I'm done. I'm checking out. I don't need this anymore. And I think it'll be easier if I'm gone. We've crossed that path enough to be like, hold up. Before you do that, let's figure out some other solutions.
Right. Right.
Why are we in this boat? You know, is this something that solely is on you, or is this something that you can step out of this, or put this on the back burner and deal with this one because this is serious, you know, here, and come back to it. But the problem is nobody takes a minute for somebody else, especially us men. And you can be alpha male all you want with that stigma that you know, you're, for lack of better terms, a Billy Badass.
Untouchable.
Untouchable, right. You're an immortal and you don't need anybody's help and you got this. You can have that mentality all you want until the day that your world crumbles and you're going, fuck. Because that's the only thing that comes to mind. That's where you're at. And at that point, you've painted yourself in the corner where you've cut yourself off from all your ties. And now you feel like that's the only option that you've got. We have got to break that boundary and confide in somebody. And I'm not talking about all of the traditional, like, the world needs you. And we're not those people, all right? We're the people that are like, hey, man, let's sit down and BS.
Right.
Let's go grab something to eat. We've done it before.
You mean to tell me that when somebody's having a hard time, you can't just say, "Hey, suck it up," and move on?
Right.
Like
Right.
that doesn't work. Who knew?
Right.
You know, like I get that mindset helps out. You know, say if you're in the gym,
Right.
you know, hey, no pain, no gain.
If you're in a
But,
combat
you
zone
know,
and people are trying to kill you, now's not the time to sit
right.
down
Now's
and
not
talk.
the time to have a moment,
Right.
have a cup of coffee with each other. But it's one of them things where, you know, you can't take and you've got these social media influencers who are teaching us, you know, hey, if your wife's complaining, leave her, you know, and you know, move on, and you know,
You don't need
just
that
suck it up.
negativity in
You
your
don't
life.
need, you know, and you know, stop being, whatever, you know, words they want to use to describe it. And it's this idea that you just, hey, you keep pushing on, and if somebody doesn't want to be part of your life, then you know, you call it a day. Well, that's not how life gets done. You know,
Right.
that's not how you conquer that. That's how you end up alone.
Right.
You know, that's how you wind up, you know, 20 years from now looking at a at a Glock that's got answers that it shouldn't have.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and so it's one of the things where, you know, getting out of that mindset and realizing that, hey, just because you're vulnerable doesn't mean you're weak. You
Fact.
know, and I had some friends explain that to me recently, where, hey, just because you're having a moment where things don't make sense and you're like, hey, I don't know what to do here, doesn't mean they have the answers, but also doesn't mean you're weak. You know, and
Right.
and you're able to drive some type of strength from that. I don't, and it sounds weird, but it's when you can take and you've got that guy there that you can trust, and it's not always, you know, it's not always the same guy. Like there's you know, I talk to you, I've got a handful of other people that I deal with, and each one brings a different aspect
Yes.
to it, you know. But I find that if you don't ever have that moment, and I think that's a good reason that this is the first episode or first real content episode that we're doing, is, hey man, you got a minute? Because you got to have that, or you don't, you know, that's the
Nothing
first
else is
stages
gonna
of
work.
it, you know.
Yeah.
You don't, you know, if I know you for 15 years and we've never really had an in-depth conversation, and I'm looking at leaving my wife, and you know, for whatever, and we have a conversation, you're probably not going to influence my
Right.
thought
You hold
process at
no
that
weight.
point, right? Because we haven't built that foundation.
Right.
And I think I think the moments of saying, hey man, you got a minute? This is what I'm struggling with. You know, I got these jackasses at work that are just messing everything up or whatever, and you're like, oh, hey, if you hate them, I hate them, bro. You
Yeah.
know, that's what builds that foundation. And edit that out.
I got you.
But
That's why I paused for a minute.
right,
Well,
But-
and that's what I'm saying. You don't have to have that guy that you can call at 2 in the morning
Right.
to go bury somebody. Okay, you don't have to have that guy. I'm sure that there's like some Wall Street guys that are like, I'm not using a shovel.
right,
Okay, like we're not judging or anything like that, but you got to have that guy that at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, you can call him and say something, because our biggest drive, and I didn't want to pull it out this soon in it, is we've looked at the statistics and the fluctuation of self-harm by males from 50 years ago to current it fluctuates by 30 to 35% every 3 to 4 years. Ironically, between the not the last 4 years, so I think it was 2016 to 2020, somewhere in that ballpark, more so towards 18 and 20. And you guys can Google it because that's as far as my research is going to go. I'm not digging into anything else.
Didn't do a thesis on it.
Yeah. We're not in college. Okay, I'm gonna Google, and the first couple of things that all look and say the same thing, that's what we're running with. Google says that they dropped. It wasn't until recently that they've increased back up 30 to 35%. I don't know what that has to do with, or what what it garners on, because I'm not reading all that crap. But our rate of life ending by our own hand, it fluctuates, and we are statistically more likely to do it than our gender counterparts, females in the world. And it's because we compartmentalize and we bottle it all up, and we don't find an avenue out.
Right.
And I can tell you, I can honestly say that if I get to that point in my life again, I know I need to make a phone call, because I know that I have responsibilities, that I've not just my children that rely on daddy. I've got my best friend, because I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know where I would go or what I would do if something happened to you, whether it was that or an accident or whatever took you out. I know that it would affect me, but I also know that there's other responsibilities that I would have to take on if that happens. Because I promise you, no man will ever be with your wife again. I have that. We've made that.
Well,
that
I
deal.
think one of the things is, because a lot of people, a lot of guys, when they take and they're driving home from work, and you've got, like we live in South Louisiana, it's not uncommon for guys to have 45 minutes to an hour and a half,
Right, getting
one
that
one way
plant
to work,
job.
one way to work,
Right.
and that's a long time to be by yourself.
Yeah.
And you can only be honest. You can only listen to so much music, so much talk radio, or whatever. You can only do that so much. Even podcasts.
Right.
Like I know some guys who got into doing hot shotting. So
Yeah.
they're driving all over across the country, dropping stuff off, and like one guy told me, he's like, man, he said, I learned Spanish, started learning French. I got tired of that, so hit all these podcasts and stuff. You can only listen to so many podcasts so much. At some point, you have to have that interaction with somebody,
Right.
But what you've got is, you got guys who are on the road for an extended period of time, and they know that, hey, they made X amount at work this week, based on, I remember when I was working in the plant or the refineries, I knew that if I made 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week, what my check was going to be.
Right.
I knew where I was, hey, by the end of the day, I'm going to have so many hours in, that check's going to be this amount. I've got to send this to this bill or that bill or whatever. And, you take, and it seems like you're never getting ahead. You're never getting ahead. When you do finally get, say extra $300 or $400 in the bank account, you're like, woohoo, and then something breaks, a water pump on the truck
Right.
goes out or something like that. You're just like, you have that where you're like, I need something to work out.
Right. Just
and
need one win.
you just need a win. And that'll be a topic that we get into a couple episodes from now. Is, hey, I just need a win. But what you run into is having that moment where you're like, to just, everything's built up, and whether
Right.
whether it be stress from finances or at work, because we've all got that one supervisor who, if you could find him behind a bar on a Friday
Just
night,
one time.
your relationship would change forever. Maybe
Just-
good, maybe
Just
bad.
want to point out, I only have one supervisor, period, and this is not the case.
That's not. It's not him. Not him. Previous supervisors.
Previous supervisor.
Yeah,
Previous.
yeah, the ones I've got now are great.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things where, you have those thoughts. You have,
Right.
And that's where I think we joke around, because I can't tell you how many times, at other agencies that we've worked at, where I've called you, or you've called me, and whether it be a coworker or a supervisor or whatever, like, you're sitting there and I can't believe what this dummy did, and
Right.
if you hate him, I hate him, and vice versa. If you like him, I like him, type thing. It's one of the things where you get that mentality going on, and it's not that can't change. And what I mean by that is, if you have, if I had somebody bother me, and I call you and vent to you about it, for that moment, for that conversation, hey, we're doing battle together against whoever that is.
The next time I see him, I'm probably gonna be a dick to him.
Right. And so it's one of the things, but it's that the camaraderie that we have in the conversation. We both know that, hey, once that phone call ends, we're moving on from there, and that's something that I don't think my wife understands, because when she starts holding a grudge, she can hold a grudge forever.
Right, I know, because we hate that lady that she works with.
Right. I've never met this lady. Never met this lady,
Yeah.
but
I've had 3 conversations.
she's got her day. It's on site.
I know. I hate her.
But it's one of the things where, as guys, we can move on. We have a moment and then we move on.
Right.
But same thing with when you get your friends and you're like, hey, I need somebody to talk to.
Right.
And that I need somebody to talk to where it can not make sense. I can't tell you how many times I've called you and it'd just be completely foolish what I'm complaining about. And I know it's foolish when I call. I'm like, hey, I'm getting this stupid stuff out.
I'm mad about it right now, so we're dealing with it right now.
It could be, a squirrel ran across the road or whatever, and just the dumbest thing. But it's one of the things where it forms that, where when you do have that moment of like, hey man, I need some help, because it's not hard from, hey man, I need a minute, to, hey, I need some help. Right. And that's where you've got to get somebody in, and we have to normalize the fact that we can be there for each other, because what's happening is, too many times, again, we're going down self-destruction where kids are growing up without dads, because dad's now a deadbeat dad, or looked at as a deadbeat dad. He's not. He probably isn't. And hey, that's a whole nother topic for another time.
Whole nother episode there.
But it's we've got to do better, and I think there's easier ways of going about it. You don't necessarily need a shrink. You just need a friend.
Yeah, and that's again another reason that we're really trying to get this going, is that you can't afford a therapist with what you need the therapist for. I want to precurse that with, if you're seriously dealing with some serious level of depression, anxiety, stressors, things like that, and you're not getting anything anywhere else, I strongly encourage you to seek that help.
Right.
Use your insurance. Use whatever you got to use for that. This is not a Band-Aid. This is not a means to make everything make sense. This is just 2 guys trying to go over some things that we've worked through and worked with. So I don't want to take away from therapy and the benefits that can come from it. But there are things that we as a generation have got to correct, and we've got to instill it in our own sons, so that we don't raise these young men to become unable to communicate with their significant others, unable to communicate with peers and supervisors and stuff like that. Because it's another thing that we've noticed, especially in our different career paths that we've all taken, is you have these guys that show up to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and they're not mentally at work. They're showing up just to collect that paycheck, but they're not checked in. They're still checked out, because they don't have a way to get that information out, that they need help. They're struggling.
Well, the thing is and we want to stress, if you're going through something, you need to see a therapist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're not willing to talk to your friend, you're not going to be willing to talk to a therapist.
Right.
Because if I don't trust my friend, I'm definitely not trusting some lady who's asking me about childhood trauma and trying to pin everything on did my dad hug me enough or whatever
Right. Or did he hug me too much?
And I say that I don't mean anything against any therapist. I've been to 2 of them so far. They didn't do anything for me, but that's also a whole different thing. I've got friends who they've been going to therapists for years, and I don't fault them for it. They needed it, and it's helped them out a lot.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things where communication's key, and if you're not willing, if you're not willing to talk to your friend about it, you're probably not going to talk to somebody who you're paying a couple $100 to.
Yeah.
About your problems.
And firm believer in, you got to get out of it. You got to put into it. And,
Right.
And if you're not willing to put into it, you're not going to get out of it. And in the same breath, because I know that we kind of not so much differ on the thought process, because I'm a firm believer with everything that I experienced in combat. I can't speak to somebody who's never experienced that side of things with their intent to give me guidance on how to correct
Right.
it, because I don't think you can. And I'm not, again, I'm not bagging on therapists, but I can't get information on how to process, move forward, and correct things that I'm struggling with from somebody who's never experienced those
Right.
aspects.
Right.
That's not the same thing as your everyday average guy life struggles, because everybody has those. And so there's no reason you can't see a therapist about non-extenuating circumstance problems that you're having, depression, anxiety, and those sorts of things. Not to use those as like my main bullets, but there are therapists who have dealt with childhood trauma, as far as a therapist, not as in their own personal experience, but they've dealt with others who have had childhood trauma. They've had other things that you can go to and open yourself up to that therapist, and they can actually give you guidance, because I also believe they're not going to become good at being a therapist if they don't experience patients with that other side of problems.
Well, and that and just so we don't beat that horse to death,
right.
that's not what this podcast is for.
Correct.
And we're not here. Hey, if you're looking at some severe childhood trauma and stuff like that,
Right.
we're not. That's not what we're here to help. Don't get me wrong, but ours is more of focusing on guys who just are having that everyday struggle.
Right.
That over time stacks in like it's life is a garbage can.
Yeah.
And you can only put so much trash in it before it spills over, and that's when you see the guys who are taking their lives, who are running out on their wives for no reason other than, hey, they some young chick at a bar
said hello, I need an ego boost.
and so it's you run into things like that where they didn't set out on that path, and that's what we're getting at. That's the purpose of this is not for the deep things. Don't get me wrong. If you send us an email, email's coffee&thebull at yahoo.com. Send us an email if you're going through something. We'll help however we can, but at the same time, you got to go to the right person for help. Like we've had that conversation before, where hey, you got to have the right tool for the job. We'll help you as best we can. Not once am I going to be like, oh, can't help you, dude. Good luck.
Right.
Not going to be that guy. But it's for the guys who are just, they're driving home right now from work, and they're like, hey, I don't want to go home. I've got 3 kids at the house. They're going to be loud. I need a moment of silence.
Right. I know the house
is a mess. The house is a mess because I haven't done laundry in a while. The dishes are piled up. We've got 16 pizza boxes in the kitchen on the countertop.
Talking about my kitchen.
Hey, you know what? Clean your kitchen. But you deal with all that, and you're like, hey, I don't want to go home. That's the guy this is for, because it's not that we're going to clean your kitchen, but it's
I don't clean mine.
trying to establish how to go about it where that doesn't take you down a road you don't need to go.
Right.
Because end of the day, you can always clean your kitchen, you always do your laundry, and it's to help you get back into that mindset. Because sometimes you just need a break, and so that's where it's at. That's what we're focusing on. I think we're going to start wrapping up here.
Yeah.
Guys, give us an email. Shoot us an email. Let us know what you're going through. Let us know. Hey, if you don't like it, by all means, send us an email. Say, hey guys, y'all suck. We'll be more than happy to dedicate a portion of the next episode to you.
Right.
But if you are going through something, or there's something you want to talk about, we're here for you. This is not just going to be, hey, deal with what we're talking about. We would love to get your input. We'd love to see what you're going through, and things that you high hopes for the podcast.
Right.
I'm very excited about this. I think it's going to be a great tool for guys who just need somebody to talk to. And so it's we got a lot of great things planned. We can always use some more ideas.
Yeah.
So shoot us an email, coffee&thebull@yahoo.com.
Definitely like we said in the last podcast, if this episode may not be for you,
Right.
but you may run into or encounter somebody that this could help them through whatever they're struggling with. Pass it on. You know, like, follow, subscribe, share, whatever all the other people
All that
say.
podcast stuff.
Yeah, you know, mumbo jumbo stuff. So if it's not for you, stay tuned for the next one. All right? We'll catch you guys around.
Toodaloo.
Stupid.